My name is Keith, 58 years old, a retired construction engineer from Chicago. I still remember that Thanksgiving evening like it was yesterday. The turkey was perfect. The house was immaculate, but my daughter Sarah's words cut deeper than any knife could. "The best gift would be for you to be gone," she said, dismissal clear in her eyes. I stood there, feeling like someone had punched a hole straight through my chest. Before I share how that statement changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you've ever been hurt by someone you loved unconditionally. You might be surprised by what I did next. I was married to Margaret for almost 30 years. We built a good life together, raising our daughter Sarah in a home filled with love and laughter. Margaret was the glue that held our family together, warm, compassionate, and incredibly patient. She could diffuse any situation with her gentle smile and wise words. When cancer took her 5 years ago, it felt like someone had ripped half of my soul away. The treatments were brutal, but Margaret never complained. "Take care of Sarah," she whispered to me on her final day. "She'll need you more than she knows." I promised her I would, and I meant every word. Sarah and I had always been close. I can still picture her as a little girl with pigtails riding her first bicycle down our driveway as I ran alongside, ready to catch her if she fell. I taught her to fish at the lake house we rented each summer, cheered at every dance recital until my voice went hoarse, and stayed up countless nights helping with science projects and math homework. I worked hard as a construction engineer, often putting in 60-hour weeks to provide for my family. The overtime meant missing some dinners, but I made it to every important event in Sarah's life. With my own hands, I built our family home, adding special touches I knew Margaret and Sarah would love: a window seat for reading, built-in bookshelves for Margaret's collection, a customized desk for Sarah's homework. College was always in the plan for Sarah. Margaret and I started saving the day she was born, putting away whatever we could each month. When Sarah got accepted to Northwestern University, I couldn't have been prouder. She graduated with a business degree debt-free because we had managed to save enough. Those graduation photos still sit on my mantle, Sarah beaming between Margaret and me, her whole future ahead of her. 3 years after Margaret passed, Sarah met James at a charity event. He was handsome, well-spoken, and worked as a bank manager for one of the prestigious financial institutions downtown. Their courtship was brief. Within 8 months, they were engaged. I was hesitant at first, worried it was too soon, but Sarah seemed happy. That was all that mattered to me. Their wedding was beautiful but expensive. I offered to cover most of it, dipping into my retirement savings to give Sarah the day she dreamed of. "Dad, you don't have to do this," she said. But I insisted. What else was I saving for, if not for her happiness? When they struggled to come up with the down payment for their first house in an upscale neighborhood, I loaned them the money, telling them to pay me back whenever they could. Looking back, I think that's when things began to change. After the wedding, our weekly dinners became monthly. Phone calls grew shorter. When Sarah announced she was pregnant, I was overjoyed, already imagining fishing trips and bedtime stories with my grandchild. Emma was born, a beautiful, healthy baby girl with Margaret's eyes. I thought my relationship with Sarah would strengthen as she navigated parenthood, that she might need my support and advice. Instead, the distance between us grew wider. Something had shifted, and I couldn't quite figure out what or why. The first time I noticed something was wrong was when Sarah canceled our standing monthly dinner 3 times in a row. "Work is crazy," she'd say, or "Emma's got a cold," or "James has clients in town." Valid reasons, certainly, but the pattern was unmistakable. When I did get to see Emma, the visits felt rushed and supervised. Sarah hovered nearby, quickly interrupting if I tried to bounce Emma on my knee the way she had loved as a child. "She just ate, Dad," she'd say, sharply taking Emma from my arms. The 2-hour visits became 1 hour, then 30 minutes. I'd arrive with small gifts for my granddaughter, a teddy bear, a picture book, only to notice on my next visit that they had disappeared. Their home was changing too. What started as a modest first house was rapidly transforming into a showcase. New furniture appeared each time I visited, sleek and modern pieces that looked uncomfortable and impractical with a toddler around. When I commented on a particularly expensive-looking glass coffee table, Sarah replied, "It's important to live in an environment that reflects your status, Dad." Status. The word felt foreign coming from my daughter's mouth. One Saturday, I offered to help James fix a leaking faucet in their guest bathroom. "I've been doing this kind of work for 40 years, I said, rolling up my sleeves. James exchanged a look with Sarah I couldn't quite interpret. "We've already called a plumber," he said. "He's coming Monday." "I could save you a couple $100, I insisted. "It's fine," James said dismissively. "We can afford it." I felt useless standing there in their marble-tiled bathroom, my hands empty of purpose. Later, I overheard James telling Sarah, "Your dad doesn't understand that some things are worth paying for. Quality work requires professionals." The comment stung. I had built entire office buildings, supervised crews of dozens, but somehow wasn't qualified to fix a leaky faucet in their home. Sarah began to criticize my appearance whenever we met. "Dad, that shirt is at least 10 years old," or "Couldn't you have worn something nicer to meet James's colleagues?" I'd always been practical about clothing, buying quality pieces and wearing them until they wore out. But suddenly my khakis and button-downs were sources of embarrassment for my daughter. At Emma's second birthday party, I arrived early to help set up. The house was already bustling with caterers and a party planner directing traffic. Sarah introduced me to her friends as, "My dad, he's retired now," with no mention of my career or accomplishments. When one of James's colleagues asked what I used to do, Sarah quickly interrupted before I could answer, steering the conversation elsewhere. That evening, while retrieving my coat from the guest room, I overheard Sarah talking to someone in the hallway. "Yeah, my dad's a bit old-fashioned," she was saying. "He doesn't really fit in with our crowd. But what can you do?" Family obligation, you know. Family obligation. Is that all I had become? Beverly James's mother was a frequent presence in their home. A widow with a substantial inheritance, she had strong opinions about everything from interior design to Emma's education. "Emma simply must attend Brightwood Academy for preschool," I heard her say during one visit. "All the right families send their children there." Sarah nodded along enthusiastically. "We've already put down the deposit," she said, though Emma was barely 2. The preschool I later discovered cost more per year than many colleges. As time went on, I found myself increasingly excluded from family decisions and events. I'd learn about weekend trips to James's lake house through Facebook photos posted after the fact. Invitations to dinner became rare, and when they did come, they felt like afterthoughts. My apartment felt emptier each time I returned from these visits. After Margaret died, I'd downsized from our family home to a 2-bedroom place closer to the city. It was more than adequate for one person, but sometimes the silence was deafening. I'd sit in my recliner, surrounded by photos of happier times. Sarah's graduation, Margaret and me on our anniversary trip to Niagara Falls, Emma's newborn pictures, and wonder where I had gone wrong. What had happened to my sweet Sarah? The girl who once proudly introduced me to her college friends as my dad, the builder of amazing things. When had I become someone to be tolerated rather than loved? Thanksgiving had always been Margaret's holiday. She'd spend days cooking her grandmother's recipes, making sure everything was perfect. After she passed, I tried to keep the tradition alive, hosting Sarah and later James in my apartment, with my amateur attempts at recreating Margaret's feast. This year, Sarah had invited me to their home instead. "We're hosting a few of James's colleagues and Mom Beverly," she told me. "Nothing fancy, just a small gathering." I was thrilled to be included, spending days preparing Margaret's famous cranberry relish and carefully selecting a gift for Emma, a handcrafted wooden puzzle box I'd made in my small workshop. When I arrived at 3 o'clock, the house was transformed. A professional decorator had clearly been at work with elaborate autumn-themed arrangements adorning every surface. In the living room, 12 adults in cocktail attire sipped champagne, while Emma was nowhere in sight. "Dad," Sarah greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek. "You're early." I checked my watch. I was actually 5 minutes late, according to her invitation. "I brought the cranberry relish," I said, holding up the container. "And something for Emma." Sarah glanced at the plastic container with barely concealed dismay. "Oh, we have a catered menu, but I'm sure we can put that in the fridge." She took the container and disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she explained that Emma was upstairs with the nanny and would join us briefly before dinner. I felt immediately out of place in my best button-down shirt and slacks among the designer suits and dresses. Beverly approached, martini in hand, looking me up and down. "Keith, you look comfortable," she said with a thin smile. "How's retirement treating you?" "Finding ways to keep busy. I do some volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity," I replied, using my construction skills to help build homes for families in need. "How charitable," she replied, in a tone that suggested charity was somehow distasteful. "I'm on the board of the Symphony Society myself, much more civilized than hammering nails, I imagine." When Emma was finally brought downstairs, she ran to me with open arms. "Grandpa!" she squealed as I scooped her up, the weight of her in my arms, the smell of baby shampoo in her hair. For a moment, everything felt right again. "Careful with her dress, Dad," Sarah warned. "It's Burberry." I set Emma down gently, marveling at the idea of putting a toddler in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. I presented her with the puzzle box, watching her eyes light up as I showed her how to slide the hidden panels to reveal the compartment inside. "What do we say, Emma?" Sarah prompted. "Thank you, Grandpa," Emma said dutifully. "That's interesting," Sarah commented, examining the box. "Though we're trying to focus on educational toys with STEM benefits." She quickly replaced it with a tablet loaded with learning apps, and Emma's attention shifted immediately. During dinner, I sat at the far end of the table, separated from Sarah and James by 3 of his colleagues. The conversation revolved around investment opportunities, private school applications, and upcoming ski trips to Aspen. I had nothing to contribute. "We're thinking of renovating the kitchen next spring," James announced over dessert. "Marble countertops, custom cabinetry, the works." "I could help with some of that," I offered. "Save you thousands on labor costs." The table went silent for a beat too long. "Thanks, Keith, but we're working with Sullivan Design. They do all the high-end homes in the area," James replied. "It's already in the budget." "Speaking of budgets," one of James's colleagues interjected, "anyone investing in the new tech fund Roger's putting together, minimum buy-in is steep, but projected returns are impressive." The conversation moved on, as if I hadn't spoken. I focused on my plate, feeling increasingly invisible. After dinner, the group moved to the living room for coffee and an early exchange of some Christmas gifts between close friends. Sarah distributed elegantly wrapped packages to several guests. I sat quietly watching Emma play with her tablet on the floor. "Dad," Sarah said, suddenly, handing me a small box. "This is from Emma and us, an early Christmas gift." Inside was an expensive-looking watch. "Wow," I said genuinely. "This is very generous." "Your old one is practically antique," Sarah said, with a laugh that several guests echoed. This one tracks your heart rate and steps. It might motivate you to be more active. I was wearing the watch Margaret had given me on our 25th anniversary. It wasn't fancy or smart, but it kept perfect time and held precious memories. I slipped the new one onto my wrist anyway, not wanting to seem ungrateful. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a small velvet box containing a gold locket that had belonged to Margaret's mother, then Margaret herself. Inside was a tiny photo of Margaret holding newborn Sarah. "I thought you might like this for Christmas," I said, handing it to Sarah. "Your mother always planned to give it to you when you had a daughter of your own." Sarah opened the box and stared at the locket. Something flickered across her face. Sadness, disappointment, before she snapped it shut. "It's very vintage," she said. "Not really my style, Dad." Beverly leaned in to look. "Gold is making a comeback, but that design is rather dated, isn't it?" Sarah placed the box on the side table. "What would you like for Christmas this year?" "A new shirt, maybe? Some slacks that weren't from the last decade." The guests chuckled. The room felt suddenly too warm, too crowded. "I don't need anything," I said quietly. Sarah rolled her eyes slightly. "Come on. There must be something you want." I looked at my daughter, this stranger in expensive clothes who bore my daughter's face but not her heart, and asked, "What would you like to give me, Sarah?" She didn't hesitate. "The best gift would be for you to be gone." She laughed as if it were a joke, but her eyes were serious. "I mean, you could take a vacation or something. You never travel. It's not healthy to sit in that apartment all day." The room fell uncomfortably silent. Even Beverly looked shocked. "Sarah," James murmured warningly. "What?" Sarah defended herself. "Dad knows I'm kidding." "Right. Dad." But I knew she wasn't. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. I stood up, placing the new watch on the coffee table. "I should get going," I said quietly. "Thank you for dinner." "Dad, don't be dramatic," Sarah protested. "It was just a joke." I hugged Emma goodbye, breathing in her scent one more time. "Be good, little one," I whispered. As I walked to my car in the cold November air, Sarah's words echoed in my mind. "The best gift would be for you to be gone." Sometimes the most painful truths are the ones we've been avoiding for years. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Margaret's old rocking chair by the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. The pain in my chest was physical, a hollowness that ached with each breath. Around 3 in the morning, I called Joe, my friend of 40 years. We'd met on my first construction job out of college and had stayed close ever since. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the hour. "Keith, everything okay?" I told him everything. Sarah's comment, the way I'd been treated, how I'd become a stranger to my own daughter. "Ah, hell, Keith," he sighed when I finished. "I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I went through something similar with my son a few years back. Remember when Michael barely spoke to me for 2 years? I did remember. Michael had married into a wealthy family and suddenly decided his blue-collar father wasn't good enough for his new social circle. What changed things? I asked. I stopped trying so damn hard, Joe said simply. Stopped offering money, stopped being available at a moment's notice, stopped accepting being treated like I was something to be ashamed of. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but eventually, Michael realized what he was losing. After we hung up, I pulled out photo albums spanning decades of Sarah's life. Her first steps, birthdays, graduations. A visual timeline of a relationship that had once been built on love and respect. When had it changed? Was it after Margaret died? When she met James? Or had the seeds been planted earlier, and I'd been too blind to see them? I opened my laptop and found myself typing "adult children who reject parents" into the search bar. Hundreds of results appeared. Articles, Forums, support groups filled with stories so similar to mine, it was eerie. I wasn't alone. One article about setting healthy emotional boundaries particularly resonated with me. Sometimes loving someone means allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their actions, it read. Continually rescuing adult children from financial or emotional difficulties denies them the opportunity to develop resilience and responsibility. I thought about all the ways I had rescued Sarah over the years. The college tuition I'd paid in full, despite her never working part-time jobs as I had in school. The expensive wedding I'd financed. The down payment loan that we both knew would never be repaid. Just last month, she had called asking for money to replace their refrigerator when the old one broke. I had transferred $3,000 without question. Had my generosity enabled Sarah's sense of entitlement? Had my desperate desire to stay connected to my only child made me a doormat? Around dawn, I made a pot of coffee and retrieved my financial documents from the safe. As the sky lightened outside my window, I created a spreadsheet detailing every penny I had given Sarah and James over the years. The final figure made me wince, nearly $265,000, not including the wedding. Later that morning, I called a therapist whose name I found through an online service. Dr. Melinda Carter specialized in family estrangement issues. Our video session lasted an hour, during which I barely scratched the surface of my situation. But her parting words stuck with me. Keith, sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is step back and allow adult children to stand on their own feet. Not out of anger or punishment, but because it's necessary for their growth and for your well-being. And that afternoon, I contacted my financial advisor and my lawyer. I needed to understand exactly where I stood and what options I had. The picture they painted was sobering but clear. I had been generous to a fault with Sarah, potentially compromising my own financial security in retirement. You need to think of yourself now, Keith, my financial advisor warned. Your pension and savings need to last potentially another 25 years or more. As I reviewed my will and other legal documents, a plan began to form in my mind, not born from spite or revenge, but from a place of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Sarah had said the best gift would be for me to be gone. Perhaps in a way neither of us had anticipated she was right. Over the next 3 days, I made more calls and appointments than I had in the past year. My financial advisor helped me reallocate some investments. My lawyer updated my will and prepared several other documents. I contacted my bank about mortgage payoff procedures for third parties. What I discovered about Sarah and James's finances was troubling. Through some discreet inquiries, and with the help of my financial advisor, I learned they were living far beyond their means. The impressive house had a massive mortgage. There were multiple maxed-out credit cards. The luxury cars were leased. The expensive vacations, designer clothes, and Emma's private preschool were creating a financial house of cards that could collapse at any moment. They were keeping up appearances at the cost of their future security, and likely expecting me to be their safety net if things went wrong. It explained the increasing frequency of emergency financial requests over the past year. Sarah hadn't called since Thanksgiving. No apology, no acknowledgement of her hurtful words. In the past, I would have reached out first, eager to smooth things over. Not this time. Instead, I focused on my plan. First, I contacted a real estate agent in Maui, Hawaii. Margaret and I had always dreamed of visiting, but never made it happen. Always too busy, too responsible, too focused on saving for the future. The agent helped me find a modest but charming one-bedroom cottage available for long-term lease walking distance from the beach. Next, I booked a one-way ticket for the following week. The holiday season might seem like a strange time to travel, but it felt right to start the new year in a new place. The most significant part of my plan involved Sarah and James's mortgage. I had enough in my investments to pay it off entirely. nearly $400,000. It would mean scaling back my retirement plans significantly, but I had always lived simply. The cottage in Maui would be far less expensive than maintaining my apartment in Chicago during the winter months. Working through my bank, I arranged for the mortgage to be paid in full, with documents to be delivered to Sarah and James on Christmas Eve. Anonymous at first, with a letter from me to be delivered separately the next day. For Emma, I created a special gift, a handmade wooden memory box, larger and more elaborate than the puzzle box I'd given her at Thanksgiving. Inside, I placed photographs of Margaret, myself, and Sarah throughout the years, along with small mementos. Margaret's favorite brooch, a small, smooth stone from the lake, where I'd taught Sarah to skip rocks, a tiny silver fish charm from the necklace I'd given her when she caught her first fish. I wrote a letter to Emma on good stationery, telling her about her grandmother and her mother's childhood stories she might never hear otherwise. Finally, I sat down to write a letter to Sarah. It took 12 drafts before I found the right words. Honest, but not cruel, loving, but not enabling. I explained that I would always love her, but I could no longer be part of a relationship where I was valued only for financial support and tolerated out of obligation. I told her about the mortgage payment, not as a way to buy her love, but as a final gift from a father who wanted to ensure his daughter and granddaughter would always have a secure home. I included my new contact information in Hawaii, but made no demands for calls or visits. The last thing I did was withdraw all funds from the joint account I had established for Sarah years ago, an emergency fund I kept replenished, but which she increasingly treated as supplemental income. I closed the account permanently. As I packed up the few belongings I planned to take with me, mostly clothes, some books, and photos of Margaret and Sarah, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I was leaving behind the city where I'd spent my entire life, where Margaret was buried, where every street corner held some memory, but I was also perhaps, for the first time, choosing myself. The morning of my departure was crisp and clear, Chicago's skyline sharp against a bright blue December sky. I took one last look around my apartment, now mostly packed into storage, except for the few things I was taking with me or had donated. My neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, had agreed to water my plants and forward any important mail. "Hawaii," she had repeated when I told her my plans. "Well, it's about time you did something for yourself, Keith." The taxi ride to O'Hare was quiet. The driver attempted small talk, but I was lost in thoughts of what lay ahead and what I was leaving behind. Would Sarah be angry about the mortgage payment relieved? Would she read my letter and understand what I was trying to say? Or would she see only abandonment? As the plane took off, I watched Chicago shrink beneath me until it was just a patch of geometry on the landscape. 6 hours later, I stepped onto the tarmac in Maui and was immediately embraced by warm air, scented with plumeria and salt. My rental cottage exceeded expectations, a small but airy space with ceiling fans, a covered lanai, and glimpses of the ocean between palm trees. The owner, an elderly Japanese-American woman named Mrs. Tanaka, showed me around personally. "Single man from the mainland," she observed. "Running away, or running toward—" The question caught me off guard. "Both, I suppose," I admitted. She nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Good place for new beginnings. Island has special energy. You'll see." That first night I sat on my lanai, listening to unfamiliar birds and the distant sound of waves. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt myself truly breathing. The next morning I walked along Keanapali Beach at sunrise, watching early surfers ride waves that glittered like liquid gold in the morning light. At a small beachside cafe, I ordered coffee and sat watching the world wake up around me. First time in Maui, the cafe owner asked, refilling my cup. His name tag read Ray, and his weathered face suggested decades under the island sun. First time anywhere in a long time, I replied. Ray nodded knowingly. Mainland folks come here for all sorts of reasons. Vacation, escape, fresh start. What's yours? I found myself telling Ray about Sarah, about Thanksgiving, about my decision to pay off her mortgage and leave Chicago behind. Bold move, he said when I finished. Not many people have the courage to walk away from toxic situations, even when staying hurts more than leaving. Over the next days, I settled into a routine. Morning walks on the beach, breakfast at Ray's Cafe, afternoons, exploring the island or reading books I'd been meaning to get to for years. I found a local community center that needed volunteers for their building renovation project. My construction skills were welcomed enthusiastically. Man who knows his way around power tools is worth his weight in gold around here, said the project coordinator, a retired contractor named David. Most of our volunteers are well-meaning, but can't tell a Phillips from a flathead. Working with my hands again, teaching younger volunteers proper technique solving structural problems. It felt good, purposeful. By the end of my second week in Maui, I had a small circle of acquaintances and a growing sense of belonging. Christmas Eve came and went. I imagined the mortgage documents being delivered to Sarah and James's home, their confusion turning to shock. The next day, my letter would arrive, explaining everything. I had given Mrs. Tanaka permission to share my new phone number with anyone who might call looking for me. On December 26th, my phone rang, a Chicago area code. Dad, Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. What have you done? Why would you do this? Merry Christmas. Sarah, I said calmly, I take it you received both deliveries. You paid off our house and then just left. Without saying anything, how could you do that to me? Her voice cracked between anger and confusion. I thought it was what you wanted, I replied. The best gift would be for me to be gone. Remember, that was just a stupid comment. I didn't mean for you to disappear to Hawaii, for God's sake. What about Emma? What about our family? I've been wondering about our family too, Sarah, for a long time now. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Did you read my letter? Yes, but Dad, you don't understand. I think I do understand, better than I have in years. I looked out at the palm trees swaying in the afternoon breeze. I love you, Sarah. I always will, but I can't be the person you want me to be anymore. The ATM you call when bills are due, the embarrassing relative you tolerate at holidays, the grandfather who gets 30 minutes with his granddaughter, if he's lucky. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. So, this is punishment, she finally said. No, this is me finally respecting myself enough to walk away from a situation that's breaking my heart. And hopefully, it's me loving you enough to let you stand on your own feet. After Sarah hung up, I sat on my lanai for a long time watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. I felt sad, but also strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without fear of rejection or abandonment, because I had already faced those fears head-on. The calls continued over the next few weeks. James called initially angry and accusing me of trying to make them look bad, then gradually shifting to a reluctant gratitude for the mortgage payoff. You didn't have to do that, he said during our third conversation. I know, I replied. That's what makes it a gift and not an obligation. Linda, my ex-sister-in-law, who I hadn't spoken to in years, somehow got my number and called to tell me Sarah was devastated by my departure. When I asked if Sarah had told her what preceded it, the line went tellingly quiet. Most surprising was the call from Beverly James's mother. Keith, I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. I had no idea Sarah had excluded you from the engagement dinner. That was Unconscionable. The biggest shock came 3 months into my stay when Sarah sent an email with a flight confirmation. She, James, and Emma were coming to Maui for a week in April. "We're paying for everything ourselves," she wrote. "James took a second position at the bank to save up. I've been doing freelance marketing work on weekends. We want to see you, Dad, on your terms this time." During those months, my life on Maui expanded in unexpected ways. I joined a group of fellow transplants who met weekly for coffee and beach walks, mostly retirees from the mainland with similar stories of reinvention. Through the community center, I met Maria, a 60-year-old surfing instructor, who convinced me to try catching waves despite my initial reluctance. "Nobody is too old to learn something new," she insisted, helping me balance on the board in shallow water. "The ocean doesn't care how old you are." After numerous spectacular wipeouts, I finally managed to stand up on a small wave, riding it for a glorious 8 seconds before tumbling into the surf. The rush of accomplishment was intoxicating. "See," Maria laughed, helping me up. "New life, new skills." She invited me to dinner at her house the following weekend. Nothing fancy, just some friends and good food. And the evening turned into one of the most enjoyable I'd had in years, with lively conversation, delicious, homemade food, and not a single moment of feeling out of place or unwelcome. As April approached, I found myself both excited and apprehensive about Sarah's visit. Would she revert to her dismissive behavior? Would James still look at me with barely disguised condescension? Would Emma even remember me? I needn't have worried. When they walked through the arrival gate at Kahului Airport, Emma spotted me immediately. "Grandpa!" she shrieked, breaking free from Sarah's hand and running toward me. I knelt down and opened my arms, just in time to catch her. Sarah approached more slowly, uncertainty in every step. When she reached me, her eyes were brimming with tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered, embracing me tightly. "I'm so sorry." James stood awkwardly to the side until I extended my hand. He took it firmly. "Thank you for the mortgage, Keith. It was incredibly generous." "Your family," I said simply. "But so am I." He nodded, understanding the gentle rebuke. The week that followed was nothing like I expected. Instead of demanding luxury accommodations or expensive activities, Sarah and James seemed content with my simple cottage and beach life. Emma was delighted by everything, collecting shells, building sand castles, feeding the neighborhood cats that visited my lanai each evening. On their third night, while Emma was asleep, Sarah and I sat on the lanai under the stars. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said quietly. "After you left, I realized how terrible I'd become. Not just to you, but to everyone. Always grasping for more, never satisfied." "What happened to us, Sarah?" I asked. "We used to be so close." She was quiet for a long time. "After Mom died, I was so afraid of losing you too. Then I met James, and his world seemed so secure, predictable. I think I thought if I could just fit perfectly into that world, nothing bad would ever happen again." She wiped away tears. "But the more I tried to become someone else, the more I resented anyone who reminded me of who I really was. Especially you. And now I'm trying to figure out who I actually want to be. James is too. That's why he took the second job instead of asking his mother for the money to come here. He said it was time to start living according to our values, not our insecurities." She looked at me with Margaret's eyes. "I don't know if you can forgive me, Dad, but I want to try to earn back your trust." "I already forgive you, Sarah," I said, taking her hand. "That was never the issue. The question is whether we can build something new, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or financial dependence." The day before they were due to leave, James approached me while Sarah was helping Emma build a sandcastle. "I need to apologize properly," he said. "I encouraged Sarah's worst impulses because they matched my own. The status-seeking, the materialism, the constant striving for appearance rather than substance." He looked genuinely remorseful. "Your leaving was a wake-up call for both of us. The mortgage. It gave us breathing room to reassess everything. That's why I did it," I explained. "Not to buy affection, but to give you freedom to make better choices without financial pressure." "We've been making changes," James continued. "Sold one car, canceled country club memberships, started actually saving for Emma's college instead of just talking about it. Beverly's not thrilled. She thinks we're downgrading, but it feels right." On their final day, Sarah asked if I would consider visiting Chicago occasionally. "Emma needs her grandfather in her life, and so do I." "I'll visit," I promised. "But Maui is home now." I gestured to the ocean view, the swaying palms, the vibrant flowers surrounding my cottage. "I've found peace here, Sarah, and purpose." "We could visit more often," she suggested tentatively. "Maybe twice a year, if we keep saving carefully." "I'd like that very much." As we said goodbye at the airport, Emma presented me with a crayon drawing. It showed 4 stick figures, 2 large, 1 medium, 1 small, standing on a brown strip labeled beach, beside blue scribbles representing the ocean. Above the smallest figure, she had written "me" in wobbly letters. Above the others, "Mommy," "Daddy," and "Best Grandpa." Sarah hugged me tightly before boarding. "Thank you for loving me enough to leave," she whispered. "It woke me up." After their plane took off, I drove back to my cottage. Emma's drawing carefully protected in a folder. The afternoon sun was turning the ocean to molten gold, similar to my first morning on the island. I stopped at Ray's Cafe for coffee. "Family visit go okay?" he asked, sliding a cup across the counter. "Better than I could have imagined," I replied. "Told you the island has special energy." He grinned. "Heals what needs healing." That evening, I sat on my lanai watching the sunset, thinking about how dramatically life can change in just a few months. I had come to Maui feeling rejected and wounded, carrying decades of trying to be needed by someone who seemed determined not to need me. Now, paradoxically, by walking away, I had created space for a healthier connection to form. As darkness fell and stars appeared overhead, I felt Margaret's presence strongly. "You were right," I said aloud to the night air. "She did need me more than she knew, just not in the way I thought." Looking back now, almost a year since that fateful Thanksgiving, I can see the journey with greater clarity. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to miss you, to realize your value not through constant presence, but through meaningful absence. My life in Maui has blossomed beyond what I could have imagined. The volunteer work at the community center led to a part-time consulting position, helping plan renovations for several historic buildings on the island. I've made real friends here. Ray and his wife invite me for dinner every Sunday. The surfing group meets 3 mornings a week, yes. I can actually ride a wave now without immediate wipeout. And my landlady, Mrs. Tanaka, treats me like the son she never had. And then there's Angela, a retired teacher from Oregon, who moved to Maui after her husband passed away. We met at a community garden project 6 months ago and have been seeing each other regularly since. She's smart, kind, and laughs at my terrible jokes. At our age, romance develops differently, more honestly, perhaps with less pretense, and greater appreciation for the limited time we all have. Sarah and James visited again last month, with noticeable changes. Gone were the designer clothes and status anxiety. Sarah wore the gold locket I had given her last Thanksgiving. She found it in a drawer while decluttering, and realized its true value. James spoke excitedly about the community coaching he's doing with a youth soccer league in their neighborhood. Emma, now 3, has blossomed into a curious, talkative child who follows me everywhere. When they visit, asking endless questions about Shell's fish and why the sky turns pink at sunset. We have video calls twice a month, during which she shows me her latest drawings or practice writing her name. The mortgage payoff turned out to be even more significant than I initially realized. 3 months after I left James's bank, went through major restructuring, and his department was heavily affected. His position was reduced to part-time temporarily, which would have been financially devastating with their previous obligations. We would have lost the house, Sarah admitted during their visit. Your gift literally saved our home during that period. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others, and for ourselves, is to establish boundaries that honor our own worth. For too many years, I tried to buy love and connection offering financial support while accepting emotional scraps in return. It was a pattern that hurt both Sarah and me, preventing her from developing true independence and self-reliance, while keeping me trapped in a cycle of giving that never filled the emptiness inside. Now our relationship is rebuilding on a foundation of mutual respect rather than need or obligation. Sarah calls because she wants to talk to me, not because she needs money. I visit Chicago occasionally, staying in a hotel rather than assuming I'll be welcomed into their home. When they come to Maui, they save for their own trip rather than expecting me to finance it. These boundaries haven't limited our love. They've enhanced it, making it more genuine and reciprocal than it's been in years. We appreciate each other now as the adults we are, not the roles we once played. As I walk along the beach each morning, watching the sun rise over the Pacific, I often think about Margaret's final request. Take care of Sarah. For years, I interpreted that to mean giving her everything, protecting her from all hardship, being available whenever she needed me. Now I understand that truly taking care of someone sometimes means stepping back and allowing them to develop their own strength. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to save both yourself and them, or found that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is your absence rather than your presence? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who might be struggling with setting healthy boundaries in their own relationships. Remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you the courage to make whatever changes you need to find your own peace.